Sexuality, and Gender in Manga podcast, where we apply a critical and academic lens to depictions of human sexuality as they manifest in the medium of manga. I am Ren. I hold a degree in psychology from the University of Waterloo with a minor in sexuality, marriages, and family studies, soon hopefully to be renamed relationship studies to be more inclusive. I volunteer as a crisis intervention specialist with SASC. My partner on this pod and in life in general is Dr. J. Andrew DeMann, an associate professor of teaching at St. Jerome's University, and an Eisner Award-winning comic scholar who studies and teaches manga at the university.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay, so the rationale for this podcast is more or less that manga is wildly popular, and so is human sexuality. How they interact is thus an important point of discussion within our culture in general, and that they be discussed is important once again.
Absolutely.
And they're often not. So
very much so.
We like manga. We thought we'd maybe try to fill in that gap a little bit with our respective forms of expertise. Mm-hmm. This is also a passion project for us. We just wanted something fun to do together where we could be all nerdy and scholarly and share things that we care about.
Yeah, absolutely. So today we're going to be talking about Ouran High School Host Club, which ran from 2002 to 2010, published serially in Lala magazine, a low-profile shoujo monthly. Ouran is easily the most popular manga to come out of it, as in I haven't heard of literally any other story they've published. That seems a bit mean.
No. Still appreciate the shout out.
They sold 13 million tankobon, and it was a... oh my gosh.
Sure. So.
Yeah. So they sold 13 million tankobon, and they had a 2006 animated series, which was commissioned and translated for North American audiences in 2008. A live-action series was made in 2011, which was not well received. Also a visual novel on PS2 and 3 soundtrack albums, reflecting perhaps a cultural significance.
Mm-hmm. Ouran High School Host Club was created by Bisco Hattori, which is a pen name. We don't actually know what her real name is. She has, however, stated that the pseudonym was chosen for great personal significance. We know, however, that she was born in 1975 in Saitama, and her series Millennium Snow garnered early acclaim, but she actually left that in order to do Ouran, which has more or less defined her career, despite a couple of other projects.
Sorry, it is actually quite entertaining that it was written under a pen name, because it seems like a lot of the culture in Japan focuses on having work-life balance, but like in a very specific, what's the word I'm looking for? Categorized kind of way. Like you are supposed to keep your work life at work and your home life at home, which is very fascinating. And so I assume there was intent there in terms of like a separation of just work and home life to be able to actually write what they wanted to write. Mm-hmm. And then we also kind of wanted to get into some of the important relevant information for Japan. So one of the things that's important to consider, especially given the context of Ouran, is the culture of LGBTQ people in Japan for a variety of reasons. Ouran involves a lot of cross-dressing, very evidently. But then also it's where individuals like Takami is actually flirting with Haruhi before he realizes that Haruhi is actually a girl. So there is inherently queer context there. Takami has made himself very clear and outspoken that, like, from the moment Haruhi steps in the host club, that men are very valid targets for their hosting as well. So as a result, it's really important to talk about the current cultural and legal situation in Japan. Mm-hmm. So getting into that, so we kind of have some unfortunate circumstances, but then some pretty good news overall. On the legal front, Japan is not doing well by my personal standards. There are a number of different issues. I will say, though, they are definitely making a lot of progress legally. There have been a lot of changes already, which are fantastic, quite frankly. So let's dig into that a little bit. So there are some key issues for a variety of different reasons, but primarily, being gay is not illegal in Japan. However, gay marriage is, which comes with a slew of problems. Primarily, there are legal ramifications to marriage, and a lot of people don't think about them very often. But they do exist. So imagine a circumstance where perhaps your partner is sick and in the hospital, and you are married to them. You are able to make choices about their healthcare. You are able to go in and be a part of the decision-making progress. You even sometimes would be denied visitation rights based off of who you were and whatnot, which you are then given access to because of your legal status with that person. They are considered your family. That becomes problematic when gay marriage doesn't exist, because that then opens the door for discrimination, which we can see culturally everywhere. Mm-hmm. There have been a number of cases in Canada where individuals who were gay or lesbian or trans were denied access to their life partners because of discrimination. Mm-hmm. That happened very widely across Canada, so it's not unique to Japan. That's just discrimination for you. Universal, maybe. But it does have a lot of ramifications, and that's also why, as much as that is a very contested notion, gay marriage was very much fought for in Canada. A lot of people think that we gave up a lot in fighting for gay marriage because we became too centralized and focused on it, and there were other rights that were more important. But honestly, I can see why we pushed for it so hard. There's a lot that goes into marriage that people don't think about it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. On top of that, trans rights in particular, lordy, not great. So at the end of 2003, transgender people in Japan were able to actually transition legally without having to undergo surgery to transition, which is problematic. So for anyone who's not familiar with trans identities, while some people do often like to transition through surgical means, it's not something that everyone wants. Some people would rather not take some of the risks involved in surgery because there are sometimes costs in terms of losing feeling in particular areas of your body, or scars that people aren't comfortable with, or, you know, for that individual, it might just be more about how they present themselves publicly than about anything with their body. It depends. It's a very unique thing. So for a long time, Japan actually mandated that you had to have surgery in order to transition, which is horrible. For a variety of reasons. Even if we're talking about someone who does want to surgically transition, they might be doing that slowly and over time, or they might want to make other changes to their appearance before that, which would have been considered illegal. There's also a number of other different things in Japan that prevent people who are trans from living authentically, which is not great. So in that same act, unfortunately, people who do wish to make gender transition surgeries cannot be married to a partner while doing so, essentially because it would change the sex and make it a same-sex marriage, and they consider that to be illegal still. So indirectly as well, gay marriage also affects trans people's identities as well. And then you also are not allowed to have children under the age of 18 years old before you transition.
Wow.
Yeah. It's not great, because that's also sending the message to children that being trans is wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think people should grow up with trans individuals in their lives. They can have a lot of impact on people's experiences, and I think it's really important, and I'm very privileged to know the people that I do who are trans. And then finally, even if you did want to surgically transition, and this is a common problem in Canada as well, the waiting list is exponentially long. It often will take years and years to actually get on the waiting list to make a surgical transition, which is really unfortunate because gender-affirming care is healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
End sentence for me. And then, there are two other ones that are really important. One we'll just kind of touch on because it's not as relevant, but I do feel people should know. Artificial reproduction technology is illegal to access for any gay couples. So nowhere in Japan will offer artificial reproduction technology to individuals who want to have a baby if they are gay or trans or any identity that is not heterosexual. That also becomes problematic because people will move out of Japan to attain that surgery, but then come back and be denied treatment because of how they became pregnant, which is unfortunate. And then, this one's a big one. Japan is the only member of the G7 summit to not actually have an anti-discrimination law in terms of sexuality. So they did create an additional law basically stating that you couldn't unjustly discriminate against someone based off of sexuality. But then that brings into question what unjust is,
right?
Or undue or whatever. Yeah. And that
it's
vague. So it is still very much legal to discriminate in Japan for things like workplaces, for example.
Right.
You can justify not hiring someone based off of their sexual identity.
Okay, so I did research too. So here's a quote from Suzuki and Stewart talking about an aspect of manga that is direct relevance to the context Ren's provided in the book that we're talking about here. Suzuki and Stewart say that, quote, "It is likely that manga will continue to play as important a role in the 21st century's mediascape in which neglected, complex, and more diverse forms of gender and non-binary sexual identities will be visualized, expressed, and, as Ren pointed out, affirmed." End quote. So Ouran brings to the fore, I think, kind of the obvious question. We have this Japanese context. Manga is, this is a massive generalization, but I think fair, really queer.
Yeah.
It has a lot of trans attributes. I know a lot of scholars have connected that in particular to Osamu Tezuka, whose Princess Knight in the 1950s is exploring trans identity and trans culture and various gender performances in some powerful ways. But Ouran is operating at a different level. There's a lot of complexity to it.
Absolutely.
The other piece that I wanted to bring forward is the concept of the fujoshi. Ouran is widely considered to be the first fujoshi comedy. This is complicated, but here's the Wikipedia definition. Fujoshi translates to rotten girl, but in an awesome way. It's a Japanese term for female fans of manga, anime, and novels that feature romantic relationships between men. The label encompasses fans of the yaoi genre itself, as well as the related manga, anime, and video game properties that have appeared as the market for such work has developed. The term fujoshi is a homophonous pun on fuioshi, a term for respectable women, created by replacing the term fu, meaning married woman, with the term fu, meaning fermented or rotten, indicating that a woman who enjoys fictional gay content is ruined for marriage.
Oof, perfect.
The name was coined by 2channel in the early 2000s as a derogatory insult, but was later reclaimed as a self-descriptive term. Fujoshi carries a connotation of being a fallen woman. An issue of Eureka, which examined fujoshi in detail in 2007, contributed to the spread of the term. So Ouran is really interested in this concept of gender performance and maybe even the performance of sexual identity. What sort of stands out to you in terms of what it's doing even?
A lot of different things. And we kind of touched on this ourselves, but behind closed doors.
That sound wrong.
You gotta make everything sound wrong.
Okay.
That's just how you have fun in life. I think one of the most fascinating things about fujoshi, and specifically Ouran being designated as the originator of it, is that it's kind of not. You defined it as something between two male characters. It's not, though. Haruhi is female, and she identifies as that, and has accepted a male identity with very little protest, I might add, for the sake of basically repaying a debt. That being said, I would argue that there is potentially some gender fluidity there, because Haruhi at no point makes any correction, which would be which would be very atypical for, I think, most people who strongly have an identity, either male or female, to do, right? Like, I have definitely corrected people on my pronouns.
Yeah.
So there's that. But then also, you know, there's a lot going on there that breaks cultural norms from my understanding, and I want to give context to this in a couple of different ways. First and foremost, I identify as bisexual personally. So I am part of the LGBTQ plus community. That's the word, community. Blanked there for a second. But then also in the context of Japan, it's very novel to have a protagonist who does cross-dress and is in a lot of ways gender fluid, and the way that that dynamic evolves with Takami. He at no point is repulsed when he thinks that Haruhi is male. He actively flirts with her. And, you know, he doesn't stop thinking Haruhi is attractive when in male form either. There are episodes of the manga wherein Haruhi does appear in more feminine dress, but Takami is universally attracted to Haruhi. But then also, you know, Japanese culture is interesting, because even though we brought up a lot of those laws earlier, a lot of the more colloquial research that I've done through places like Reddit, and I want to be clear here, it's mostly through a foreign lens, in that, like, a lot of the people on Reddit who I had the opportunity to go over the responses of, they very much were talking about being a foreigner coming into that culture. So they're definitely lacking some things. But essentially, they don't have much difficulty living their lives with queer identities, because the cultural response in Japan, even if something is wrong or undignified or socially not acceptable, is pretty much to ignore it. Yeah. So
one of the things that I think is kind of interesting in terms of the setup of Ouran Host Club, high school host club, is the way in which gender performance is written into the plot. Like, the host club itself is performing a series of masculine archetypes for the sake specifically of sexuality. Right? Like that's where they make their money.
And some weird archetypes too, I might add.
Yeah, very over the top and extreme and kind of rom fantasy, would we say?
Yes, there is also a lot of, like, the one character plays very much into being childlike.
Yeah.
And that one's an interesting one for me personally.
Yeah, there's a genre of manga called lolly something con, lolicon.
I think so.
And the lolly stands for Lolita.
Yes.
So yeah, there's I don't know. There's ways in which this whole thing is a send up.
Yeah, it's a lot of things all at once, and a lot of different, like, and even the relationship between the twins, right? Like, that's a little incestuous.
Very.
But they play into that. That's part of the dynamic that they present to the people who are coming to their host club.
Yeah, it's very much, and again, I think this idea of performance really is sort of the unifying thread, but it also creates some instability in like the symbolism in a way that I really like. It's disruptive, I would argue. Like, everybody's playing everybody. The whole thing is just a role. And I think Haruhi, as you said, like, Haruhi's doing it for the money.
Absolutely.
That's it.
As are we all.
As are we all. And I don't know, I think that brings in the sort of intersections of gender performance and capitalism.
You could even argue that what Haruhi is doing is sex work. Well, and then even if we're talking about just gay identities for a minute here, like, Haruhi is a female individual adhering to a male role for the sake of appeasing female clients, largely.
Yeah.
So it's gay in a lot of different ways.
That's a good tagline for Ouran High School Host Club. It's gay in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Well, and then I believe, I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, don't put this in.
Okay.
But I believe that there are also episodes of Ouran where the other members of the host club dress up in feminine dress instead, which is everyone's just very fluid here. And a lot of, I would even argue a lot of the ways that Takami in particular presents himself, even though we talk about them as being hyper-masculine, they're really feminine in nature. And that's very evident in a lot of the ways that the panels are set out even as well, right? Like, it's a very florally dictated manga in a lot of ways. The additions that are added on are very much roses and like romantic lenses that are often mostly applied to female characters in other contexts.
That sort of shoujo scrapbooking style, I would call it.
Yeah.
Everything's rendered cutesy.
Yes, and like the lines that Takami says as well are very much cut and paste out of a romantic fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like he doesn't say what he thinks is romantic or attractive. His entire goal is to say what the women around him want to hear.
Right.
And he's good at it.
Very.
Mm-hmm.
Which is especially interesting in like the setting. It's going to be a long simmering romance in Ouran. But like the idea of an authentic romance developing over the course of a series of inauthentic romantic performances.
Absolutely. And I would... It's also very fascinating how he's worked so hard to develop this skill about talking to women and saying what they want to hear, and Haruhi has no F's to give about any of it.
It doesn't work on Haruhi at all.
Not even a little. Haruhi's just like, I guess I'll pretend that was effective for the sake of your ego.
Yeah, and I think that maybe speaks to Haruhi's role as a protagonist too. Haruhi is the one who is outside of the system a little bit.
Yes.
The one who's living a more authentic life, I would argue. Mm-hmm. Which is interesting for the character who comes in explicitly performing.
I disagree with you here.
Okay, I'm ready.
So I do think Haruhi's played as a much more authentic individual.
Mm-hmm.
I do also think that, especially in the context of how we're dividing this in terms of class as well,
yes,
that's very important. And we could also look at this as Takami has the freedom to do that performance, right? Where he can be gender bent and like fluid sexually and, you know, be just way more open about the very dramatic traits about himself. But Haruhi has very real practical concerns. Mm-hmm. So depending on how you wanted to make that argument, you could also argue that Takami actually is, because of his privilege, able to express himself more freely.
Would you be willing to make me look smart by reading the quote that I have right at the top of the screen there? That's like exactly what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. All of Haruhi's suitors, both male and female, are nonetheless clearly fascinated by Haruhi's otherness, as her commoner heritage reveals a world of exotic attractions like fast food, instant coffee, and apartment living. Furthermore, since Haruhi's need to cross-dress for the host club is a direct result of her socioeconomic status, the host's fantasies of rescuing her from poverty are often intertwined with their desire to restore her femininity.
And that's from Darlington and Cooper. And then the other quote on the same subject I have, I'll just read quick. This is Susie Julie. Quote, "People with non-conforming sexualities may be excluded from social and economic participation, or included on adverse terms. However, this is not always the case. Some richer people are more constrained in terms of expressing their sexuality for fear of jeopardizing their inheritance or reputation." And Ouran kind of explores both. It almost seems to me like some of these wealthier characters are limited to these sort of sexual roles that society has deemed acceptable for them. Mm-hmm. Where again, Haruhi, perhaps because of her being sort of a lower economic status, might actually have more freedom. And that's an interesting and like contentious.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree with you there.
Okay, no, that's fine. This can be a podcast about you disagreeing with me.
Well, the frame of reference that I'm going to use, even though it's a bit of a weird one in this particular context, is actually polyamory in North America, right? We find predominantly that the people who are engaging in polyamory, at least openly and publicly, are people who are white and upper middle class.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, that's
so so in a way, being able to be public about those things is very much a privilege. And then also, like, the the way in which Haruhi presents her himself, he/him, or oh my gosh, whatever, she, him, whatever, Haruhi.
We can just
I'm sorry, my brain. The way that Haruhi presents themselves as well is fascinating for a variety of reasons. I would also say it's very fascinating that like the gender identity of Haruhi is very much kept a secret except in the host club. Like no one else in the school recognizes Haruhi as a female individual, and there are actually several plot lines constructed on making sure that Haruhi is recognized as male exclusively. Right. So I'm not even sure I necessarily agree with the quote of them trying to rescue her femininity. I do think they all have very much a fantasy about her as a female individual. But I think they've also all fallen in love with her as a male presenting character, and that's the context in which they know her under. They can't realistically form love and attraction without associating her as male.
Right. Okay. No, I like that.
That's good.
Yeah. So the other thing I think about is Haruhi as almost like a trickster figure, as someone who disrupts a quasi-binary system. I know that's a bad term to use here.
Is it?
I think so.
Okay.
Because the club itself, I do find innately queer.
Yes.
But that could be a total quality. So Haruhi comes in, and the idea is that Haruhi would be a disruptive influence. But over the course of Ouran, Haruhi works fine. Haruhi keeps the club running. The only thing that Haruhi really upends, if you will, is Tamaki, who finds a sort of sincere romantic connection through Haruhi. So I'm reading her both as kind of this like disruptive figure, but also this figure who's almost normalized. If we could argue that the high school club in the story can normalize anything.
Oh God, I wish it was normal. I would be very okay with walking into high school and just having a host club. That would bring me so much joy.
There's no way.
There's no way, but I would have loved that as a teenager.
But I know your feelings on aggressive capitalism. You would knock over the vase and just flip them off and walk away.
Yeah, I totally would.
Yeah.
But I'd still want to be part of the host club. I would knock over the vase to get in the host club.
Okay. That's good.
I would host individuals. I'd have the most fun doing it, in fact. Not relevant, but we're allowed to be cute.
So maybe related to these sort of questions of normalization and fitting into genre versus subversion into a genre. This is actually a long-standing debate around Ouran High School Host Club in terms of whether or not it's truly subversive or whether it's actually kind of normalizing in a weird way. It has been read as just a gag on otaku culture. That the ultimate argument that emerges from Ouran is essentially mocking queer people.
Right.
That has been made. And then other people, I mean, obviously this is a manga that is extremely popular in the queer community. So those layers of irony, they're kind of problematic in how this story is received in terms of what it's saying about, queerness and sexuality and gender performance, all the things that we're kind of, latching onto as a reason to even talk about this thing.
Yeah, Can I make a bad joke?
Yeah, please.
I think queer individuals are just so used to their lives being a joke that they're just like, hop on board.
Yeah.
No, I do think I do honestly think it's both, because I do agree that in the majority of the series or episodes, a lot of the hyper-femininity shown on Takami's side and a lot of the gender refusal or acclamation on Haruhi's side is very much made fun of. But especially Takami. Takami's played for laughs.
Agreed. Yeah.
Very frequently. But he does have an inherently hyper-feminine presentation in a lot of the things he does. So it does strike me in a way as having the potential to be very problematic. But looking at the impact, right? Like, it was one of the first things that I watched as a youth. as a youth to like connect with that community. And it was really, for me personally, validating to have that experience of an individual who could cross-dress and successfully present as either male or female. And it was validating to see characters who were dramatic and over the top. And I do think there are people who are very I don't know, who find that very appealing, I would say. But then also I would look at, for me, drag culture here, which is often done in a lot of the same context. Like, I would say drag is very often played for laughs in a lot of different ways, but it's also a very affirming thing for a lot of people.
Right. Yeah. That mix of as you said, irony and affirmation, which we could argue is an innately queer structure in itself. Yeah. But is it okay if I straight explain queer culture to you?
I mean, I'll be mad, but no, go ahead. I'll just tell you you're wrong afterwards.
Okay. Good. Okay. And then I don't know, maybe worth talking about if we end up going anywhere with it is like otaku culture specifically. The idea of this very passionate fan base that can be very inclined towards certain tropes and certain stereotypes. Like to me, when you talk about gender performance and expression and stereotype, but like I like the way that this sort of foregrounds the idea that like the strong, silent, brooding man is kind of a silly thing when you think about it, or the like, you know, smart, smarmy academic guy, which is very close to my identity, is kind of a silly performance as well, and the extent to which we're all performing gender and sexuality for the sake of finding a good partner. Like,
do you think you found one?
Yeah, by being smart and smarmy. That's how I did it.
Agree.
I was like, I host a podcast.
No, I do think that's a very good point. And gender is very performative. Yeah, so we define sex as the biological components of a person, not just the chromosomes, but the way that their body physically and is just articulated. But then also we have gender, which is very much conceptualized as performance, especially in the field of SMF, which I come from. So it very much validates that thing that you're talking about, is gender as performative, because it is a performance. Every person does it, right? Like the way that we brush our hair or put on a shirt or how many buttons we leave down or undone. That's all gender. And we don't often conceptualize it that way as a society, but once you start thinking about it, like realistically, a lot of the way that people know whether you're quote unquote male or female or anything in between is based off of the way that you present yourself. Right? And then the other thing that I think is inherently interesting is the rankings within the gender performances that are available. Because we have characters performing specific roles, and they are judged through the lens of whether Haruhi is attracted to them or not. Yeah. And the extent to which they pursue any kind of romantic relationship with Haruhi. They're all attracted to her. They would all date her.
Yeah,
it's
so
pretty explicit in the text. They all have at least a very strong affection for her. However, her choosing Takami, especially at the end of the series, I think is really significant. But then also, like, some of them do not really get a romantic plot line. Like the character who plays out the big, strong, silent masculine type does not stand a chance with Haruhi. And then the character who very much embodies this childlike behavior, this boyishness, is also very much scorned as a romantic partner for Haruhi. And that leaves the twins, the smarmy financial accountant.
Best one.
Best one. And then we have this like ladies' man archetype who is inevitably the one who ends up getting chosen.
Okay. But I don't think he gets chosen because of that archetype. I think he gets chosen when he rejects it.
I agree. I don't disagree with you there. But it is inherently, even before that point, because the point at which Haruhi actually accepts him is way deep in the series, and before that, we're going off of a ranking system. Even in the way that the hosts are presented, Takami's the popular one. Yep. 100%. And then it goes to the twins, and then there's a ladder.
Just to speak to the fluctuations of capitalism connections throughout, please note that popularity translates to money. So you can literally measure who's the most romantically appealing by how much money they're bringing into the academy.
Show me your bank account. Sorry.
No.
You're not allowed to look at mine either. It's tragic right now. Sorry. That is a very valid point, but it's interesting that those two things coexist. Yeah. To what extent is it economic? Because I don't think Haruhi as a character is interested in the economy of it all. It's definitely brought up in the show repeatedly as these extravagant show displays of wealth. Yeah.
She likes tuna.
Yeah, but for a girl who likes tuna and a night on the couch, Haruhi has very practical, down-to-earth concerns, and I would even buy if they had given her the character trait of thinking money was important because it got you things that are practical. Yep. They really didn't, though. They took a hard left on that.
Yeah, I agree. And again, she's portrayed, her economic class is portrayed as more desirable than the upper class that the other characters have, and all are as you said, what do you call it? Coffee grounds? What is this?
Instant coffee.
Instant coffee, thank you. And they're so intrigued by her life and her junk food and stuff like that. So again, she's positioned as the one who is kind of in the right.
Yeah, very much
and
so.
She heals them, which is almost maternal as much as romantic at times.
It is, and it's a very weird line. She's very much corrective of the behaviors of the other members of the group. I personally don't love that in female characters, just because it reinforces having to teach men how to be human.
Yes, and we have seen a lot of that in popular fiction.
Yeah, where haven't we seen that is a better question.
Yeah. Right down to fairy tale tropes. And unfortunately, we still see it.
We do.
A lot. Where, I don't know. I mean, maybe the one thing moving against that is that Haruhi is the protagonist.
Yes. I would argue. I would argue that her being the protagonist actually puts more onus on her in terms of responsibility for guiding this group of boys into an appropriate direction in their lives.
Yeah.
I think they're putting the responsibility for how these boys end up in the future on Haruhi, and they almost collectively agree that Takami needs her the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so obnoxious literary theory structuralism.
Okay.
A protagonist is literally defined by their ability to make choices that impact and affect the plot. Right? If you look at the plot of Ouran High School Host Club, it's largely affected on to Haruhi. She gets to make decisions, but her defining character attribute is that she just kind of goes with the flow most of the time.
Yeah.
So she's almost like an anti-protagonist to me in some ways.
I would argue in a lot of ways Takami's the main protagonist.
Really?
Yes. Okay. Which is controversial. I think the show is often way more about the people she affects, which tend to be the other members of the host club, than herself.
Right.
Right? There's even an entire episode where they go to visit her on summer break and they learn things about her that they did not know before. And realistically, if you think about it, when do they learn anything about her? When does her personality come to the forefront other than in the contrast of teaching these other people in her life lessons.
Yeah, we could call her like a cipher character.
Yeah.
She's there to reveal aspects of them. Like she does provide resolution to a lot of their fundamental crises. I would say the twins are the best example of that, but Takami as well. She teaches Takami real love.
She does. But I think that's also interesting, because if we're using her as a stand-in, then the gender fluidity of it all is also interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because is that then intentional?
Right.
Where everyone can be a stand-in, or is that saying something about the role of masculinity and femininity and defining how we shape ourselves? Like I would argue that you could say that Haruhi presenting as male throughout the majority of the series is basically saying that men are responsible for keeping other men in check.
Panopticism.
And to be honest, I don't even necessarily really agree with that standing.
Yeah.
But I do wonder if we had Haruhi as a completely female character in exactly the same role with a female gender presentation, would the things she's saying be as effective?
Yeah, I would say no.
Mm-hmm. It's an important question.
Yeah. So we don't know what we're doing.
Never.
But we thought by way of conclusion it might be nice to try to essentialize a little bit and have each of us provide a takeaway from whatever it is that we're studying each individual episode in terms of what this thing does, let's say, what insight Ouran can spark with regard to sexuality for each of us, like the main, let's say, takeaway. And you're on the spot to go first.
Oh, always me. Started it, I'll end it. It's kind of hard because there's a lot. One could jokingly say that the main takeaway is that it's okay to be gay, but it's not okay to be rich.
Okay, that's awesome. Again, a great thing to put on the back of the book.
No, but I do think Ouran has a lot to offer in terms of gender and sexuality, right? And we have very much examined this through a Western lens, admittedly, right? Like we are not in a position to really comment on Japanese culture.
No, we're in a trade war. Not with Japan. I'm currently in a trade war. Okay, so sorry.
But I think more significantly, I think it's very much a push in a lot of ways to accept numerous different gender identities, both within our arguable protagonists, plural. But also, I do think the overall messaging is that it's really okay to fall in love with people regardless of gender, and I think that's okay. That's good.
That's really sweet.
Yeah, could be wrong, but that's what I choose to take away from this.
For me, I think my favorite takeaway of Ouran, it is kind of maybe evident in the way we're talking about it. I like that it raises a stupid amount of questions about sexuality and gender performance and does not provide easy answers.
I agree.
I think it has that, again, disruptive potential.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I was taught in SMF that I try to take with me everywhere I go, Carm, lovely woman.
Carm DeSantis, yeah.
Carm DeSantis, oh, wonderful, wonderful human being. But she always said that SMF was the practice of learning to be comfortable with discomfort. And she framed it very much as this idea that like everyone has a comfort zone, but it's our duty and obligation to figure out a way to step outside of that to learn more. And I think Ouran does a really wonderful job of presenting that, right? Like it's the questions that it's not answering are leaving room for exploration, and they're leaving room for discomfort, which is, in my opinion, how we grow. And
the way it does it in like an engaging and entertaining format. The fact that it is delightful while taking on these kind of subjects. That's really cool, and I think to me shows the kind of work that a popular medium artifact can accomplish. And should have, I would personally argue. Andrew, why don't you tell the people where they can find you? So this is hopefully, because I haven't gotten approval from my partner on this one yet, part of the Project Sequential Scholars, which is a public-facing comics project in which we bring comic scholarship to a regular audience instead of just, academic journals that are read by 6 people, most of whom are usually family members.
I do want to be clear, when he says partner, it's not me.
This would be Dr. Anna Pafard, who is my partner on the Sequential Scholars project.
Mm-hmm. Not life partner. That's mine. No. Dibs.
No, because Adam would hurt me.
What? Oh.
Anna's life
I would hurt you.
Okay, well, I couldn't even flee to the States. Adam would find me. Adam's delightful, by the way. Okay, so yeah, that was our podcast about sex and manga.
Yeah. Join us next time when we talk about Beastars.
Something. Beastars.
Beastars.
Is it Beastars?
We're going to do Beastars. Okay. We'll figure it out.
I'm good.
But join us next time when we talk about Beastars and we explore the way that sex and gender can have impact on things like that as well. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone.
Perfect.